So supposedly there's something that could be coming when it comes to Zebec in 2026. What is that? The CEO of Zebec, whose name is Simon, by the way, not to be confused with Simon Cowell, but I'm saying Simon, even though nothing I say is financial advice, in a recent Spaces on X, he did mention how when it comes to payroll streaming, it was launched on Solana. However, they're going to be adding new ecosystems and chains on the payroll side throughout the year. So again, they're planning things for 2026, and they're going to be adding again new ecosystems and chains on the payroll side of things, basically. Why do I think it's pretty cool? Well, it's because even though ZBCN is around 45 times lower than 10 cents, even as of right now, so it has had a slight recovery. But even besides that, I'll talk about that later though. But let's talk about this real quick, because again, this I think is pretty impressive, because if they're adding new ecosystems, if they're adding new chains, supposedly, and they're planning that for throughout this year, I think that right there is first of all going to enhance maybe the adoption, right? Because it's going to open more ecosystems, open more chains, in which case we know that, payroll streaming, it was launched on Solana. Solana is a very popular layer one blockchain. However, not every single individual out there is going to want to use Solana, right? Not every single individual out there is a fan of that, even though I think it's cool, Solana, but not everyone may think that way. So having more chains, more ecosystems, that's going to open more doors in my perspective. Not to mention, if I take a look at it as well, if they're adding new chains and new ecosystems, I think that could also, again, increase the attention, right, when it comes to Zebec overall, because, again, maybe someone's a fan of another ecosystem, if they're a fan of another chain, and maybe they take a look at something like Zebec. That could matter, right? Especially, again, if they're going to be adding new ecosystems, new chains, that could have more eyeballs when it comes to Zebec overall in terms of just the notoriety of the project. So I do like seeing that. I like how Zebec is attempting to always diversify, right? Initially when it comes to Zebec cards, I did see some memes that they were partnered up with, and that was pretty cool. But also, if we take a look at Zebec, they did have a partnership with Algorand. We also take a look at, for instance, the partnership that they had when it comes to World Mobile, right? Also, furthermore, we take a look at Zebec having a partnership with something like Lattice, which is allegedly the first neobank built on the Canton network. So really, in the grand scheme of things, Zebec has many, I think, pathways, in a sense where it's diversifying a lot. And I do like that. More pathways, hypothetically, more roads to hypothetical positivity, maybe. But we'll wait and see. This is just kind of my analogy. So if I take a look at something like Zebec, I just think it's pretty cool overall, because if we think about it, payrolls, it's one of the key things that Zebec is focused on, right? The last time I checked, Zebec has over 200 payroll enterprise clients, so it's not that bad in my opinion. I mean, it's pretty established when it comes to that field. So again, if they're going to be adding new ecosystems and new chains on the payroll side of things throughout this year, I do like seeing that. And again, people like to say that, oh, Simon forgot about Zebec and all this. But, I disagree. I still think that he cares about the project overall, and I don't think he's given up, right? And I don't want to give up either. This is just my mindset. Now, back to ZBCN in terms of the charts. Again, it's around 45 times lower than 10 cents. Some people like to say, oh, it's not that good and all this. But actually, the amount of holders more or less kind of stayed the same at around 96,000 despite this recovery. Slightly though, when it comes to ZBCN, keep in mind the greed and fear index when it comes to this space overall, it's still at fear. Not too long ago we were at extreme fear, so it's done a little bit of moving, right? The needle has moved a little bit in a slightly positive direction, but in the grand scheme of things, we're still kind of low. But because I'm looking to dollar cost average, if I see things that are low, I'm not going to be complaining, because my intent is to accumulate, not to exit, even though I am not telling anyone to do anything. And actually, funnily enough, right, not that long ago, I saw a statistic according to sentiment, and it was kind of along the lines where when it comes to alt season discussions, so basically altcoin season discussions, right, it basically hit historical lows, in a sense where we haven't really seen this in a very long time. These ranges, it pretty much hit rock bottom territory. It's very similar to where the altcoin space was in terms of the discussion on social media and stuff like that before the 2021 altcoin season. Now, are we going to see an altcoin season this time around? Who knows? I mean, I can't control that, but usually what happens if things are very low? Sometimes things can only go so low, and if it is so low, what's the only direction it can go? Sometimes it's maybe, hypothetically, in an upwards direction, right? In some cases. Who knows what's going to happen in this case, but it's like, for instance, the floor, sometimes if we can't go any lower, the only way to go is up. Sometimes maybe. Not in every single case, and it has nothing to do with this, but I'm saying just in kind of real life in general, sometimes that's the way to take a look at it. So yeah, when it comes to the altcoin sentiment basically being very low, that's not a time where I want to leave. I want to be more focused because, in my opinion, right, the way to take a look at it is if things are low, the journey maybe seems a little bit far, and I want to be a part of that journey. It's like, for instance, is the sentiment better right now when it comes to Bitcoin or when it was at $10? Arguably, I would say it's way better right now, right? Even still, despite we saw Bitcoin not too long ago being at over 100 grand, now it's below 80 grand. Of course, the sentiment was better at around 100 grand, but still, even with this pullback, despite the slight recovery, the sentiment right now is way better than where it was back at $10. But who's happier, dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin? The ones who are still holding as of right now from $10, or the one that started dollar cost averaging at over 100 grand? Arguably, I would say the one that is probably at $10, right? So this is just kind of my mindset. So do I want to complain about something like Zebec? The answer is no, I don't want to, because I still believe in the project and I still like it overall. So I just don't want to give up like that. This is just my mindset. I am not telling anyone to do anything, but okay, ZBCN at 10 cents, the market cap needed would be around 9.8 billion, and especially considering the current circulating supply of ZBCN. But let's just say we ignore that for a bit. Let's just say ZBCN goes back to a market cap that it had back in June of 2025. So not even a year ago. Let's just say back in June. Market cap at that point was slightly over 500 million. So let's just say for simplicity's sake, it's 500 million, right? We're over 2 times lower than that. If ZBCN just goes back to where that was, that's kind of already a little bit of a time for me to go to Sizzler. That's the way to take a look at it. Time to kind of maybe for me to celebrate a little bit because, again, we're over 2 times lower than that. That's the thing. But yeah, only time will tell. We'll wait and see. But ZBCN has clearly proven that it was able to reach around a 500 million market cap without an altcoin season, right? So yeah, I'm still waiting. I just don't want to give up, let alone if there was an altcoin season. Again, if it's able to reach around 500 million without an altcoin season, what could it do with an altcoin season? That's the thing. That's why I just haven't given up. But this is just my mindset overall. I'm not telling anyone to do anything. This is just the way to take a look at Zebec as of right now. I'm still looking forward to 2026 and what that could be, but we'll wait and see.